Hello, listeners, and welcome to our new podcast, Behind the Crime Scene.
Behind the Crime Scene is going to go into depth in some of the world's biggest true crime cases, solved or unsolved. We will be discussing the case, the suspects, and lastly our take on the case and who we believe is the culprit.
But first, we're going to do a little introduction of ourselves.
Hello, I'm Yasleen. I've always found true crime intriguing. I'd like to dive deeper into the cases I've grown up hearing.
Hello, I'm Allison. I love the suspense in trying to solve a mystery and the psychology behind the crimes. I find crime intriguing and chilling at the same time.
Now, on to the case. On December 25th, 1996, the Ramsey family had just came home from a Christmas party in their hometown of Boulder, Colorado. The Ramsey family, which consists of John, the father, Patsy, the mother, Burke, the brother, and Jonbenét. The family fell asleep that night in their bed, still joyous with Christmas spirit.
Little do they know, all their lives would never be the same when they woke up the next morning. The next morning, the youngest member of the family, 6-year-old Jonbenét, was missing from her bed. Before calling the police, her mother, Patsy, found a ransom note. Jonbenét's father, John, had reported her missing from their home at 755 15th Street.
The police arrived at the family home to see John and his wife, Patsy, distraught.
As the police and John searched farther into the house, they made a horrific discovery. Jonbenét was in the house, dead, face down in the basement. They then knew this case wasn't as simple as it seemed.
Making the case even stranger, she had been there for 8 hours without being found. The crime scene was reportedly heavily compromised, so there could be information still not known about the scene. Jonbenét had duct tape over her mouth. She had sustained a broken skull due to the blow to the head. Lastly, she was strangled to death with the garrote around her neck.
Jonbenét's death was ruled a homicide. Curiously enough, there were no footsteps in the snow outside the family home. It had not snowed any time close to the murder, and the police found no signs of forced entry. In addition to these odd details, a paintbrush from Patsy's hobby kit was used to tighten the rope that strangled Jonbenét. So Yasleen, what are your thoughts on this case so far?
Definitely, it is strange that they allowed the crime scene to be heavily compromised before the cops came in, and that basically just ruined their chances on finding out who did it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting of how the police let John search with them. Like, I feel like if I was a cop, the first thing I would do is try to put aside the people in the house, because you never know what they could be trying to hide or trying to kind of move you away from looking at. And I think it's kind of odd how they went around that, as well as the fact that she was found in the house and they said she'd been there for 8 whole hours. Like, how do you say that your daughter's missing and then she's found in your house and she'd been there for 8 hours? Like, you didn't look everywhere?
Yeah, like, if I was a parent, I would look everywhere, no matter what, to find my child if they went missing.
I think it's really interesting, like, how the police went about this. I think there was definitely things that they wouldn't have done now. They weren't done correctly. Even for, like, 1996, I think this is kind of sloppy work on the police's part.
Yeah.
I will now read the ransom note. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you will bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on the delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of that money and hence an earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions, and you will stand in a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny, as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You're not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing us will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It's up to you now, John. Victory. SBTC. There's just a lot to unpack here.
Honestly,
I don't even know where to start. First of all, something that you guys, since you're just listening, that you may not have been able to tell, but a lot of words aren't spelled correctly that you feel like if you are a grown adult, you should probably be spelling these right. But they're using a lot of also really difficult words to spell, and they're spelling those correctly. And they're using these words and spelling these correctly, but they're using stuff, they're scratching things out. They scratched out delivery and put pickup instead. Some of these things I just don't really understand the reason for.
Yeah, and another part that's really weird is that they requested $118,000 for the ransom. That was how much John had gotten for his Christmas bonus that year, which is, how did they know that was the exact amount that he got that year?
So the $118,000 is a very specific amount.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something that you're just gonna guess.
Yeah.
And what are the chances that's the exact amount that he got in bonuses that year? So there's just so many things that are so questionable about this, and also the facts. I actually think it's kind of funny where they say you stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter. Why is it not 100?
I know.
I think, there's just certain things about this that's just so odd. I'm like, and also them saying they're a small foreign faction. So what, are they trying to say that they're like a terrorist group?
Yeah, and
who's doing this?
And the ransom note is signed SBTC. What does that mean? Is that a group?
Yeah, and also these can't just be random people because they say use that good Southern common sense of yours, which obviously they knew that John was from the South.
Mm-hmm.
So, how are they getting this information? This isn't the kind of stuff you can just make up off the top of your head.
Yeah. Whoever wrote this was definitely very, very close with the family.
Yeah. And I just think it's so odd that they call him Fat Cat. I don't know if that's, something people said back then. I just think it's really odd.
Yeah.
Yeah. This whole thing is just very weird.
Now, we will go over a part into the case that sparked nationwide controversy, the child abuse case. The case happened after Jonbenét's death. The indictment alleges that between December 25th and December 26, 1996, John and Patsy unlawfully and knowingly permitted Jonbenét to be placed in a situation that can either result death or harm her health. This resulted to her death. They were indicted of child abuse due to this. Prosecutors decided not to act on the formal accusation in charge of the couple, and the documents remained a secret until a newspaper reporter and press freedom group convinced a judge to unseal them.
Our first suspect is John's own mother, Patsy Ramsey. Patsy was suspected of having accidentally murdered John in a fit of rage over a bedwetting incident, then covered it up quickly. From the outside, Patsy looked like a loving suburban mother of two, but on the inside, there was more to this mysterious woman that no one knew. The speculations on the murder were that Patsy was cleaning up John's bed after a bedwetting incident. She then went wild and slammed her daughter's head against the side of a hard, blunt surface. Jonbenét was found with a rope around her neck tightened by paintbrush out of Patsy's paint kit. Patsy also was the first to discover the suspicious ransom note that we discussed earlier. Boulder PD's former leading investigator speculated Patsy wrote that note herself in a moment of panic after realizing what she had done. It had been determined that the paper was Patsy's stationery from inside the home with her own pen. In the following years, Patsy remained defensive, and she then died in June of 2006.
The second suspect is John's father, Jon Ramsey. The morning after the murder, the first police officer on the scene sent John and his neighbor Fleet White into the house after her search to look for anything unusual. Ramsey ran straight to the basement where they immediately found his daughter dead. Though he had been told to keep everything as it is, he picked up her body, brought it upstairs, removed the tape from her mouth, and set her down. He covered her with a blanket, further tampering with the evidence. The police officer started to feel that John knew too much, and as she kneeled by Jonbenét's body, she felt so convinced the murderer was in the house that she started to count the bullets in her gun in case she had to use them. A detective on the scene also found John very suspicious after hearing John making arrangements to fly the family into Atlanta, Georgia just hours after the murder. Our third suspect is Jonbenét's brother, Burke Ramsey.
Burke was shielded during this time heavily from his parents. He was known as a very quiet and strange child. Families close to the Ramseys often told of Burke's violent behavior to Jonbenét. In 2016, the 29-year-old software developer creepily grinned through Dr. Phil's line of questioning that ran down the chain of events leading up to the night in question. Soon after, CBS aired The Case of Jonbenét Ramsey, a two-part documentary that reinvestigated the evidence of the crime with a select group of FBI and forensic experts. Documentary leaned their suspicions towards Burke Ramsey as close as they could without making any kind of formal accusation. The CBS team set up a compelling theory. Famed forensic investigator Werner Spitz's review of Jonbenét's autopsy included a perfectly rectangular defect that he suspected came from a blow to the little girl's head with a blunt, heavy flashlight seen in a photo on the kitchen counter in the crime scene photos. He claimed the flashlight fit the 8.5-inch gash in her skull to perfection. Lastly, the wounds on Jonbenét's back, previously assumed to have come from an encounter with a stun gun, were consistent with the edges of one of Burke's toy train tracks.
Our last suspect, John Mark Carr. Carr confessed to murdering her in 2006, but before that he was trying to hint to a journalist for 8 years that he had been the murderer. At first, he didn't talk to the journalist about Jonbenét. He had to ease his way into the topic. He will talk to the journalist every day for 8 years up until his arrest. He also claimed that her death was an accident. He also claimed that he was very sorry for what happened to Jonbenét, but ultimately he was released by the police due to lack of evidence.
Now onto who we think murdered young Jonbenét. In my opinion, the whole family was involved in the murder, but I think the culprit is Burke Ramsey, Jonbenét's brother. The fact that the marks on John's back matched one of the trains from Burke's train set just shows how Burke was most likely having another one of his many fits of rage with his anger issues and took it out on John, which resulted in her death. The CBS documentary displayed how a boy around Burke's age and size could easily crack a skull with a flashlight, as thought to have been the weapon used in the killing.
Just like Allison, I personally think it was her brother Burke. He constantly had anger issues and other behavior problems. He was known to be a strange kid. During the autopsy of Jonbenét's body, there were train tracks on her back, just like how Allison said. The train tracks are believed to be from Burke's toy train tracks. Burke has had so much evidence against him, and I would be very shocked if he was not the killer.
While we may never know the full truth, what happened that fateful night, it's crucial to approach this topic with sensitivity and respect. By discussing this case, we can shed light on the complexities of unsolved mysteries and the importance of seeking justice. Thank you so much for listening to our first ever episode of Behind the Crime Scene. Make sure to like and subscribe to hear more bone-chilling crimes. Crimes.